Good afternoon. Welcome, everybody. Hello. Come on in, sit on down. Good to see all of you here on this beautiful afternoon on May 30th, 2023. Welcome to the Jaybefaunt channel. I am your host, James Fauntleroy. So good to see you here with me today. The Jaybefaunt channel is available on all major podcast platforms, so subscribe to me there. Also part of the Revolutionary Blackout Network, so you can find me on there as well on a weekly basis. Thank you so much to everybody for coming in. We have a great show for you today, so I cannot wait to get into it. But before we do that, I'd just like to say thank you to everyone who is in here, who are watching at the moment, and people who are pour in, and people even on the rewatch. Just to give you all a thanks to all of you who are my patrons on Patreon, as well as Coffee. For without you guys, I would not be able to do this. So thank you so very much. Without you guys, I would not be able to do this at all. Thank you to the patrons on Patreon, Coffee, as well as members. Yes, I also do have membership. So thank you so very much for that. Also, if you would like to get notifications instead of relying on YouTube for the notifications, you guys can also go to my Substack. You guys go to jaybefaunt.substack.com. You guys can get those email notifications so that you guys do not miss out on a stream on a daily basis. So now, just to let you guys know what I'm going to be talking about today. As per usual, I typically go to the comments in the chat to say hello, but I'll go there a little bit later. One of the reasons why is because I have a great guest, and I'll show you guys the thumbnail here. Chuck Modiano is coming on with me right now, and I am so excited to have him here introducing the journalist and activist. So, Chuck Modiano, good to see you, Chuck.
JB, hey, good to see you, JB. I really appreciate the invite and having some time to talk. Let's talk.
Yeah, definitely. Now, you are a journalist. You are a sports journalist, as well as you are a journalist on the ground that covers the movements that happen before our very eyes.
Yeah.
How did you get into journalism, and what was it that sparked your interest as a young person?
Well, I don't think I got into it that young, right? I got into it a little bit later. And I would say the first time I started putting a mic in front of people's face, it was the Gina 6. I don't know how many people recall Gina 6 in 2007. I was in Washington, D.C., and I drove, my wife and I drove 24 hours in a bus. We didn't drive. We went in a bus with a whole crew. And the Gina 6 were a bunch of young men who were being railroaded by the system in Louisiana. And I started interviewing people there, and it was the first time I started interviewing people, and I would say, why are you out here today? Now understand, it's 2007. Cell phones they're not what they are later on. And so let me just fast forward when it really starts to take off. I'm in DC, and now Trayvon Martin is being railroaded, and we want to arrest George Zimmerman, and their DC protests. And now I start going with a video camera and interviewing people. And I've always been interested. And I say, it's very simple. Why are you out here? Why did you come out here? And the reason I do that, whether I do that in Ferguson, we're in Standing Rock, Charlottesville, George Floyd, the reason I do that is because what media does is criminalize and demonize the protester. And I wanted to show, that's not what I saw when I went to protests, because I had gone to protests and I saw the most amazing people you could ever find, the most passionate people, the smartest, most intellectual people. And I say that who are privy to information that you don't get on corporate news that I would learn from. And I said, wow, I want to communicate what they're saying, what's going to be filtered before it hits CNN. And that's what I do. And so I'm not really deep with it. I'm not like, I don't ask leading questions. Why did you come out here today, JB? Because I want to know what motivated you to get off your couch into the street. And the distance between your couch and the street is a very serious story.
Wow, man. You ever hear the phrase KISS, keep it simple, stupid?
Yeah.
And it's like, that's really just what it is. It's just simplicity, and simplicity, it just comes out in such marvelous ways. Like, for instance, um, as you all know, I'm a food lover. Look, I look the part, right? So some of the best meals are the simplest meals. And that's one thing that I was taught in culinary school. Best meals are simplest, right? It could be just eggs, bacon, toast. Eggs are eggs, toast is toast with butter, bacon. Boom. And for some people that's the best, right? The thing is that it because it's so simple, that's why it's so enjoyable, or that's why it's so relevant. And the thing is that giving us such a simple question and let people go, like that is what I think is the best. And I'm literally learning from you right now, which is great because it's like I'm like in a class right now. And so I find that to be, I find that to be inspiring because I don't want to be like CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, CBS, and I know you don't want to be. And you're basically teaching basic journalism, even to the big wigs, which I appreciate. So, yeah. One of my other questions is, what makes you the happiest when it comes to doing this work? Like, is it just finding out different perspectives of people? What is it that what was the trigger for you to get out there?
I mean, the trigger is there's these horrible injustice going on. And if you ask me the question in different years, I'll give you a different answer. When I spent months in Ferguson pushing a lot of my work to the side, and a lot of people will tell you the same, I truly believed at that time, no matter how naive it sounds right now, that if just enough people knew what was really going on, not the CNN version, but enough people knew about this police oppression. And when I say people, white people, let's be honest, I'm talking about white people. And the majority of black people know what the hell's going on. So if we just hit a tipping point of white people who knew the horrific police terror that is going on, that it would make some significant change. This is me in 2014. I believe that. I no longer believe that. I believe after we know what's going on, after we see video after video, even after we see George Floyd, and we're taking a back turn since George Floyd and funding police departments even more, I no longer have that same optimism that said, if it's just a matter of awareness. It's not just a matter of awareness. It's so much deeper than that. But awareness is the prerequisite to justice. Awareness won't bring you justice. I used to think that. That's not true, but it's a prerequisite to justice. So I just want to do that part and say, okay, if you know what's going on, if you saw George Floyd, if you saw Walter Scott, if you see the statistics and you know what's going on and you're still not trying to stop police terror, you're still not trying to defund these departments and reroute the resources, then you have a problem. You're the problem right now. That you are knowingly supporting terror. So that's what awareness could do. And after that, there's a lot more that needs to go on as far as activism, but it's one slice.
But what do you think is going to be that tender moment, that moment where the spark hits and an explosion happens, socio-politically? What do you think is going to And do you think it's going to happen within the next 5-10 years, or you think it's going to take longer? What do you think?
I mean, I've been wrong about it. I thought Ferguson was going to do that. I thought George Floyd is going to do that. Now, there's a historian part of me, and activists will talk to each other and say, well, look at the civil rights movement from 1954 and Brown versus Boardification to 65 and the Civil Rights Act and all of the different events that happened during that time, that these things don't happen like one event or two events. It's a sustained approach. You're going to have backlashes to the progress, and it's going to go back and forth. And those are the vicissitudes of fighting and activism. You have to be in for the long haul. And I get that. I say that. I preach that. I tell people the Montgomery bus boycott lasted a year and 15 days. And if anyone gave up before a year and just said, we gave it our best shot, then it wouldn't have moved forward. So we have a history that we have to draw on to not be so demoralized, right? We have to do that. So it's not good to look at it as one event or another event, but to be in for the long haul. But I will say this,
Yeah.
because it's so demoralizing of not seeing the change that you expect to see, and particularly after this George Floyd that we're sliding backwards, right? It's so demoralizing. There are these moments that keep you going that you have to hold on to. And I had a moment this week. And this past week, and it usually comes from a family. This is what sustains me when there's no political movement. I had a family member say, you know what? And I've had this a lot. Through your coverage, I got to know what was going on. And thank you so much. And giving me a hug and wouldn't let go. Well, my daughter was arrested and no one knew what was going on. I was looking at your feed. I was looking at your updates. Thank you for interviewing my daughter afterwards. Thank you for letting me know what's going on with my daughter. And if you get enough of those, and I got a lot of them, whether from participants themselves, say, thank you for giving us a voice. No one else will give us a voice. Those things sustain you. They may not be like the institutional change that we want, but it's something, right? It's something that says, you know what? I know I'm doing the right thing. We ain't there yet. We're not even close to there. But I'm going to keep doing it. And you know what? If all we got this past week is that, that's enough. You know, like that's something. You're making the people's lives in that movement more worthwhile. You're making them feel heard. So that's something to sustain you while you try to go for the macro change.
Okay. Thank you for that, because I honestly sometimes wonder, when will we reach our limit? And sometimes I'm like, is it going to be just extremely slow and gradual? But then I remember talking to Noah Krajcevich, the Western Marks, and one of the things he said was, there's a quote where they says, a lot of progress will happen over a long period of time, and then sometimes a huge amount of progress can happen in 1 week.
Yeah.
And so I guess I'm still just like waiting for that 1 week. But it's like I have to be comfortable with the slow sustained change. But we also have to be the people that continuously push. Right?
Yeah.
And so I feel like I have to be more patient in my head, while still also being impatient enough to push. Does that make sense? Does it make any sense? I don't know.
It makes total sense. And you're constantly having to recalibrate your expectations. Listen, yes. I know this happened to you. It's happened to me, and it's happened to every activist who's ever lived. You go through these almost near bouts of depression, almost, where you're like, my God, like, what do we got to do to wake this world up, right? Like, you saw this video. This is not okay. This is, whether it's Derek Chauvin, and I don't mean just Derek Chauvin going to jail, and I don't mean the 3 officers who are watching him go to jail, which they should, and that's a very tiny win. But if that happens, and you have 3 officers there, and you have Mike Freeman, the DA, who, remember, was trying to protect Derek Chauvin that first week until the uprising happened, that means you have an entire rotten, disgusting, corrupt criminal culture that says it's okay. And if you don't recognize that culture, you don't fight about that culture that goes far beyond Derek Chauvin, and you don't try to remove the money that's subsidizing that culture, well, then we have a problem, and it gets depressing when other people don't see it. So there's this constant recalibration of what you're trying to do and what your expectations are. So I've lowered my expectations to, you know what, if it doesn't create the big change, I know I did right by those protesters. I know I did right by those protesters' families that are not being heard. And that has to be enough, because otherwise you'll bang your head against the wall, you'll go up in a hole, you'll get depressed. I've been depressed, you've been depressed, we've all been depressed. And You just have to lower the expectations to a human level, and anything you get beyond that are bigger wins.
Yeah. I was thinking, as you were explaining, I was thinking of an analogy that I can think about it as, and it's like trying to crack a rock, but everybody has a little hammer and everybody has a little chisel. And as you go to it, you go and you put that hammer and that chisel in, and then you take one hit, and everybody comes in and takes another hit. Boom, boom, boom. You may not have chipped off that much, but if 1,000 people all came behind one another, that is 1,000 chips that,
Yeah.
it takes off that boulder. And I think that boulder is the system. But then there'll be that one person that takes that one good chip and then a huge piece comes off. And so I think that is what I think we're both kind of, circling around as far as
Yeah.
this explanation goes. And so that's why I feel like we should have hope. And I think that part of it is in what we cover and how we cover it as well.
Yeah. Can I offer some somewhat hopeful things that came out of 2020 that maybe everybody forgot?
Please do.
Okay. There are positive things that came out of that. Okay. Now, that's before Biden was elected and became a national sedative, which is actually what happened. But before that, we saw colleges across the country kicking police off of their campuses. They had police contracts, and they said, we don't want to have you as a contract anymore. And that was going on all across the country. We saw 3 or 4 localities start to defund the police. I think there was Seattle. They were rerouting to the homeless. There was Austin. There was another. It was happening in these little pockets. It was moving in that direction. I don't know the status right now. We even saw a state, Colorado, say, the governor, we're going to get rid of qualified immunity. Not the biggest thing in the world, but it's something. Progress was going in that direction. And it didn't happen through a legislative vote. It didn't happen through a Congress. It happened through a governor saying that. And these things were happening because of protesters, not through any elected process, through the protesters. And we saw these pockets of change. And then I want to add one other thing, which I think is huge now, even though we don't see it. Particularly shout out to my DC family and protesters. Change the conversation from reform to defund. That defunding the police, removing resources from police, abolish the police, whatever you want to call it, police abolition, has been an idea that has been stuck in the prison of academia, that has been stuck in the prison of activist circles. Angela Davis has been talking about it for decades now. Others have. And it never got mainstream. And what happened is the DC protesters mainstreamed it overnight when they wrote Black Lives Matter equal defund the police. And it was in such big letters. And I was out there the night that happened. It was in such huge letters. The media, the CNNs, your MSNBC, they could not ignore it because you had these shots from over above. And if you looked at media overnight, you started hearing about defund the police. The Overton window changed. Now we can actually discuss it and not be seen as a crazy person. Like, you can do that. You have scholars who've been talking about it, and now we can have reasonable discussions. And you even have pockets of people even running on. And that could only happen from those protesters. Those protesters mainstreamed it. So when there comes a day, I don't know when that day will be. It could be 2060, 2050, 2080.
Chuck.
I don't know. It could be dead. You and I could be dead. But when there comes a day that really defunding the police in a significant way or abolishing the police becomes a reality, we're going to point to June 2020 when they shifted the Overton window.
Yeah, I think your mic went out for a second.
Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you, but it's kind of low.
Oh, say it again. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah.
Did you hear me, or was my voice going out?
No, it went down severely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I was just giving credit to those protesters. They mainstreamed defund the police. They shifted the Overton window, and they brought it into discourse. And you're not marginalized as you're over here in the corner. That you're not rational. Now we can have a rational discussion. What scholars have been talking about for a long time, that the way
to stop police is to remove their resources and give their resources
Yeah.
to other individuals who are skilled in these areas, when over 80% of all police calls are not even about violent crime to begin with. So we could talk about that now. And those activists did that. The activists took what the academics were saying for years and mainstreamed that. And that continues now. So if there comes a time in 2050 or 2070 when we're dead or whatever, where it becomes a reality, we could point to the summer of 2020 and those activists.
Mm-hmm. So, Chuck, is there any way you can unplug and then plug it back in really quick?
Okay, am I still low? Hey, what about now? Hold on 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
Okay now?
I can hear you now.
Am I okay now?
Yeah.
Okay. When I was speaking before, it was very low?
Yeah, it was very low. Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that.
I think we're back now. All right. Thank you very much.
I lost you now.
Mm-hmm.
Let me try that again.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Now
okay. You hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm just getting confirmation from everybody in the chat. Yeah. Everybody's saying it's pretty much fixed now. So I think we're good. Darn that planned obsolescence. Okay, now I can't hear you. Uh-oh. You're muted.
Tech issues. I think we're probably good now.
Okay, now you're good. Okay.
Okay, sorry about that.
No, it's all good. I was just saying, planned obsolescence is a pain in the neck, you know. So these companies don't make things that work as long and as well as they should. But yeah. So you were talking about, you know, the onset of protests that really makes the change as far as what, you know, the national conversation is. You were talking about, you know, regarding defund the police, which I have, you know, for me, it was a transformation to hear more about police abolition and the way that we know it. So it actually helped me a lot to understand how the carceral system actually works.
Yeah. You know what? And I think we have to approach it, you know, the best way. A lot of people find it so unreasonable, but they don't find unreasonable that white supremacists are on the street and murdering people. Like, that's not unreasonable to them. And I don't get that. But what is reasonable to me, and the number of people, abolitionists, take this approach, is instead of everyone starts the conversation with, what about the murderers? What about the rapists, right? Everyone starts it, and that's the wrong way to start it. You start the conversation with, what about all the calls that have nothing to do with violent crime, which is like, depending where, over 80% of calls. Why can't we remove all those calls to specialists who get paid like half the price, who don't retire at 50, don't have $1 million pensions, and are twice or 3 times as qualified and won't murder you in the process? So if it's a mental health call, have a mental health specialist. Have more school counselors who could work on de-escalation. Have people who are trained at de-escalation, not incentivized for escalation. And if you do that and you have the conversations not of violent crime, but the vast majority of police calls that have nothing to do with violent crime, then we could talk more freely. So there's no reason anyone shouldn't be on board with, say, cutting the police departments in half overnight and using those resources in other ways. I mean, if they're not bought off by the police union, which every politician is. But you get my point. The point is, intellectually, it is a rational conversation that people have made irrational when they're the irrational ones for supporting terror.
Well, I mean, if we're going to look at it, you know, let's be more data driven when we look at these things.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, some people, cite data, but the thing is, they'll cite inaccurately. Like, for instance, people want to talk about 13% of the population commit 50% of the crimes, when in reality, it's like, okay, if that's the case, then why do we, black people have the highest exoneration rates?
Right. That's true. And I like to talk about, crime last. And so much of that crime is preventable, right? If you're giving people their basic needs. So you don't give people their basic needs and crime elevates. But we have to question as many people do, that even police solve crime and stop crime, because we see they don't. When they have huge police forces, it's not having an impact either way. What police do is serve themselves. They serve their own budget. And I would argue create crime because they starve other resources. They remove other resources that are more preventive of crime. So, when I'm covering McPherson Square in DC and they're getting rid of all of the unhoused in the tents in DC, well, I see a bigger problem here. And I see the criminals as the police who are getting rid of them. So, I mean, I'd like to see more housing. I'd like to see so many more basic needs, more healthcare. Those are the conversations we need to have.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the things I wanted to ask you was that we're trying to keep this in the conversation, in the ether, so to speak.
Yeah.
And it's no surprise that people know that I'm on the left. I don't want to speak for you, but the thing is that what do you see that could be better as far as our communication on the left when it comes to these issues of policing, housing, education, foreign policy? What improvements do you think that you see that we could make?
I mean, all of the above. Are you talking about messaging, communication, or the issues themselves?
Messaging, communication, as well as coming together instead of having a constant infighting. And especially see this with the online left, especially.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that, because I've been feeling like an island the last year. Many people have been a little bit. Because there's so many, people arguing with each other. And a lot of times, I'm going to be honest, I see a lot of people going back and forth, and I like the work both of them do, right? I like the work, and I don't really want to pick a side, because I like the work you do here. I like the work you do here. We're all flawed. I'm flawed. I've tweeted some stuff from 2-3 years ago. Hell, maybe even 6 months ago. I'm like, why did I even say that dumb shit? We make mistakes, and I think we have to understand that we make mistakes, or that we evolve, and how do we deal with that? So, I'm a little bit old school, right, in activism, and I say old school in the sense that if I have a problem with someone who I respect their body of work, I'm gonna DM them, I'm gonna call them up, I'm gonna get them on the phone. Hey, listen, man, I know you've done good work, I know you've done great work, and we're not gonna agree on everything, but on this particular one, I do vehemently disagree. I want to tell you why, and let do what you want with it, right? You have these calls, and I think part of what has happened, where so many of the divisions are brought online, is those steps are skipped. I'm not going to act like activists never argued in the past, and that's never existed. That's always existed. Mm-hmm. But I think part of going online, certain steps are skipped, and when steps are skipped, it is much harder for me to have a conversation when everyone else is jumping in at the same time. Now you're kind of flexing for other people rather than, trying to resolve an issue. So I've seen it with activists, like even in DC covering George Floyd, there'd be two organizations that would be arguing with each other. And I'm like, nobody outside of DC knows any of this. Everyone here is DC Black Lives Matter to everyone outside of DC. Nobody knows all the different organizations. So you always have that going on. And then it's reached podcast level. So now we have 457 different leftist groups, and who you're with and who you're not with. So I'm not saying my way is the right way. I'm just telling you what I do. I like to do stuff behind the scenes, and I'd like to see a little bit more of those steps before we go bam online. That's just how I feel about it personally. Mm-hmm. Because if someone does good work, we have to respect the body of work. right?
Yeah.
That's how I feel. I vehemently disagree with everyone all the time. That's going to happen. But is your body of work good? And if
Yeah.
your body of work is good, then let me judge you on that, not whatever the 10% we may vehemently disagree.
Of course. What about the messaging as far as the left? What do you think that we could do better?
Um, so I say this as a reformed liberal. I'm a reformed liberal, right? There's no argument a liberal can make that I haven't already previously argued on in terms of pragmatism and how do we move forward and we have to take some steps instead of nothing. I know all those arguments. Again, this is my personal view. Like, there are a lot of liberals who could be more leftist, for lack of a better word, or we could bring along if we didn't always call them stupid idiots. All right, because in many ways I try to change my language. It's easy, right? It's maddening. Sometimes you'll just trust me. I'm guilty, right? It's maddening sometimes because you see the same behavior over and over. But I always have to remind myself, I was that person. So am I going to
Yeah.
shun who I used to be? Who I used to be. I can't shun who I used to be. I got to try to bring people along if they're close, and I can't necessarily call them an idiot because they may have real fears. Like a lot of times, intellectually they're with you, but they have some real fears, which makes them beholden to a guy like a Joe Biden who has horrible policies and whatnot. So I think for me, it's being able to try to communicate, and not everyone's an idiot. Now, we have to separate those who are trying in good faith. I always try to do this, and it's very hard. But who's a good faith disagreeer and who's a bad faith disagreeer? And if they're bad faith, I got no time for them. I just got no time for it because you're not even trying to find truth. But there are a segment of people who are legitimately trying to find the truth, and they're just misguided. And that group, I mean, you got to bring along, because do I want to be part of a group of leftists that are right about all this and right about that, but we're like talking to ourselves all the time? I'm tired of talking to people who think like me. I want to grow. We have to grow. We have to grow. And as an anti-war activist, I've been looking at the same 200 people for 10 years now. I'm tired of looking at the same 200 people. How do we grow, right? What do you do? And I can say that for a number of issues. And part of the reason is we can't call everyone an idiot. We just can't call everyone an idiot because they're not getting it. That's just me. But some people disagree with that, but whatever.
Yeah. I go back to, and I love when he said this, and may he rest in peace, Michael Brooks.
Yeah.
And Michael Brooks said, "Be kind to others, but be ruthless to systems and institutions."
Yes.
I think that goes a far way. Now, with dishonest actors, it's just like, you know what? Ain't got time for you. I'm gonna move into a different direction.
Mm-hmm.
But it's one thing, and I've said this in private conversations to friends who are in this space, and I've said, they're not my enemy. Racism, homophobia, transphobia, misogyny, this Western supremacy. These things are my enemy. Capitalism is my enemy. So therefore, I'm going to fight this to change the system so that people are better off. You may have people that are speed bumps along the way, but they're just speed bumps because they're propaganda, they're brainwashed into being speed bumps.
Right.
So I could either, just move them out of the way and say, you know what, I'm going to keep going forward, or I could teach them in a kind way and say, look, this is what I think you're getting wrong. And then I'll teach them and plant seeds in their mind. But if they still don't get it, then I'm going to let you sit with that for a while.
Yeah.
And I'm going to keep moving in my direction.
I agree.
Because I think that if I have the correct idea, I'm going to eventually it's going to come to fruition that I have the correct idea.
Yeah.
So
No, I agree with that. And yeah, I mean, you have to mobilize, and we can learn a lot from right wingers as far as strategy goes. Right, they're far ahead. Yeah, forget their ideas, because basically the right wing in this country, its main idea is how do we keep this country white, and everything is essentially built around that form of white supremacy in one way or another, right? But they're fighting for something. I mean, they're fighting to keep this country white, and by any means necessary. And the problem is, when we're talking about, or how we view the left, or I want to separate maybe leftists from liberals in the Democratic Party.
sure.
They're not fighting for anything, instead of not being as bad as Trump, or not being as bad as DeSantis, or not being as bad as that bad Republican. They're fighting for nothing. And the reason we have gone right and gone white over the last 40 years is because when you fight for nothing, the scale will keep going the other way. So we have to stay on the issues. We got to stay on Medicare for all, on human rights, on being anti-war, on against police terror. We have to fight for these, and for housing for all, for college tuition for all. These are ideas, right? These are policies, right? So we got to stay on these policies and focus on these policies that are grounded in human rights. So you have one side is grounded in white supremacy, and the other is grounded on human rights. We have to stay focused on those, and we don't do that. And I don't know who, when I say we, let's just say that the two parties, there is a right-wing party and a more right-wing party, and they are much better at moving in that direction because they fight for something. So I don't believe you could ever win anything if your political paradigm is we're not as bad as them. No.
Absolutely. I think this is why a lot of us would say, well, if you're a liberal, you're still right wing. But a lot of liberals will be like, no, we believe in all these things. And I'm like, yeah, that's the floor.
That's the floor. But here's the thing. That's the floor. But if liberals defined by following the Democratic Party, it's not that you believe in those things. You don't believe in those things, because if Joe Biden takes Josh Hawley's amendment to put 100,000 more police on the street, then you're actually not against police terror. So like we got to fight. I always say Trump's bigotry is in his words, Biden's bigotry is in his budget. You got to do a little bit of work. Yes.
I gotta run. I gotta go. This is. Ooh, look. I'm gonna clip that one.
Clip it. I say it all the time. Trump's bigotry is in his words, Biden's bigotry is in his budget. So you got to do a little work. Why are you increasing the ICE budget? Why? Why are you increasing the police budget? Why? Why are you increasing the military budget? Why? All forms of white supremacy, by the way. All forms of white supremacy. Why were you for pro-mass incarceration in the 80s, even to the right of Reagan? Why? Why is every policy, when you've ever been in power, to go to the right of the most right Republican? Why? You got to look at the fine print. And the fine print is that he's a hardcore right winger, but he talks and he says something different.
Yeah, looking back at history, especially in 1920s and 1930s, Italy and Germany, who was the one that was standing to the side while the fascists actually came through? A lot of it was the liberals, and even some of the social Dems. They stood to the side. They were like, we don't really want to bother nobody. We don't want to tip the apple cart. And a lot of people tip the apple cart because they're going to kill us all. And so now we're just like, you see? So we're trying to prevent that, because if you keep standing to the side and just allowing them, then it is going to end up in winding up getting a lot of us killed. And so that's what I see. But it also comes with speaking to them in a way that doesn't cause them to shut down.
Right.
Because if we speak to them in a way where they become defensive, they're not going to hear what we're saying. And
That's right.
so we have to treat liberals like we treat MAGA. We have to put things in a way where they will understand. Some won't. In fact, a few won't. But even if we could take the argument and maneuver it in such a way where they can understand, maybe they may not pick it up, but the people around them may pick up some little nuggets, and it may grow in their head, you know?
Sure. And so let me go back to an earlier question of how we could articulate things. So when I'm in leftist circles, everyone talks about, rightfully so, capitalism owning both parties. And I hear this all the time. And we say, well, it's two of the exact same parties. And you're going to lose a lot of liberals that way because there are some differences, but there are 90% the same. But I think the equation has to be articulated a little differently. Mm-hmm. You're not voting Republican, Democrat. You're voting Republican versus Democrat and plus the loss of resistance. And that's the big part, meaning there's some things that when Trump was doing, we were in the streets by the thousands. Yeah. I was videotaping them by the thousands. Just that Trump did it. Kids in cages, Muslim ban, his rhetoric around police, what he talked about, people came out and people fought back. And the second Biden got elected, all of a sudden, those same people, and I'm speaking mostly of white liberals, they went to sleep. They took a nap. So my thing wasn't Trump versus Biden. My thing was Trump versus Biden plus a loss of resistance. So if Biden says something like, we're going to have 100,000 more police on the street, there's not a peep. There ain't no one in the streets. No one's fighting back. If Biden increases the ICE budget, it's not, or keeps Title 42 that was implemented by Stephen Miller and Donald Trump. Well, we hate Stephen Miller. We understand intrinsically Stephen Miller's a white supremacist. We get that. We're going to go in the street. But when Biden kept Title 42, there's no resistance. Now it's okay. Okay? So everything Biden did that was and does that is Trumpian now gets a pass where maybe Trump couldn't even get away with some of the stuff Biden gets away with. So for me, it's not Democrat versus Republican. It's Republican versus Democrat plus the loss of a resistance and fighting of a movement. Because at the end of the day, Democrats will never, ever, ever fight against whoever their figurehead is. And no matter what they do, no matter how right-wing they are, no matter how anti-human rights they are, no matter how many people they incarcerate, no matter how many bombs they drop, no matter how many police they put on the street, as long as there's a D before that name, they will say it's okay because they're not as bad as Trump. And there's something psychotic in that thinking, something very wrong in that thinking. So wrong that you could actually say Biden doesn't even need to be primary. So you don't have the pragmatic excuse anymore of we have two choices. You don't even want to primary him, Bernie Sanders. So I got a problem with that.
You know what? This is a tale as old as time. Because who passed NAFTA? It was Clinton that passed NAFTA, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So Clinton was able to do things that Reagan was like, oh, that's too hot. I can't touch it.
Right? Yeah, that's right.
Clinton was the one that signed the 94 crime bill.
Yeah.
Reagan didn't touch it.
Reagan didn't do that. Clinton did that. I want to go 6 years deeper than that. The worst crime bill of all the crime bills was actually 1986. And the 1986 crime bill was far worse than 94. 94 was terrible, the Biden bill and Clinton. But Biden's worst work was 1986. He had presidential aspirations. And what Reagan wanted to stop the crack cocaine disparity at 20-1, which is already wild and nuts. Biden pushed for that disparity to be 100-1. Meaning, if you had a piece of a bag of sugar that you get there, or you got a huge Domino's 2-pound bag, that cocaine versus crack, those two sizes would become equivalent when one was in powder. And Biden fought for that. And Biden fought for the 5-year mandatory minimum sentences just on possession, not distribution, possession of crack. And we have all the video of him saying this, right? And Biden went to the right of Republicans on mass incarceration, including Reagan, including Strom Thurmond. And we have to understand that because we warned about this. And now he's doing the same thing again with policing. now that he's president now, that we were supposed to get a warmer Uncle Joe. And that never happened. And we warned about it because Biden's way has always been, if I go to the right of the Republican, if I'm harder than the Republican, that could take that issue away. In other words, black people are just pawns. People's lives being destroyed through mass incarceration or bombs abroad, it doesn't matter as long as I can stay in power. That's Joe Biden for you. And he gets away with it because we allow him.
Yeah, because we allow it. That's a really good point. And speaking of the allowance of what these politicians are doing, speaking of President Biden, I have a question for you, and this is more of a situational question that I ask a lot of people. So, Chuck, you're now president of the United States. It is your inauguration.
Yeah.
What are 3 policies that you're going to do, that you're going to enact within your first 100 days?
I'll go more than 3. I'm going ham on executive orders.
Go ahead.
I'm going ham on executive orders. Medicare for all, tuition for all, anything. And when you say something like this, invariably there's going to be a Democrat, someone from the Democratic Party in my timeline saying, don't you understand the Constitution? Are you an idiot? Do you not understand how the law works? That's going to be contested in court, and you may not get away with it, which may or may not be true, right? But what Trump did is he didn't care. He changed the national conversation. There are 2 types of power. There's power of policy and there's power of rhetoric. And Trump was a master in using his rhetoric. He changed the Overton window of what we talk about and what we didn't. Every time he tweeted some craziness, every time he put some executive order that would invariably be shot down later. He made the news networks talk about what he wanted to talk about. And by changing the national conversation, you're changing the culture in America. And by changing the culture in America, you're being able to change future legislation, whether you got that piece of legislation in now or not. So all of these banning books, all of these laws we're seeing locally, all around the country, wouldn't have been possible a few years ago, but Trump's rhetoric did it. We don't need Trump. He's replicated himself. He's cloned himself. He's changed the white supremacist culture so that everyone in his party could go much farther now than they could before he arrived. So when you have a rhetorical power, Biden will never use the rhetorical power, and Biden apologists will say, well, it's not going to work. It doesn't matter if it works or it doesn't work. You're going to change the conversation, change the culture, and we'll change the law later. And if you don't understand that, then you don't know how movements happen.
Well, yeah, I mean, that was a great point. I mean, because, hell, Bernie didn't even ascend to the White House, and he changed the conversation.
Yep. Yep.
I mean, putting aside my extreme disappointment and respect for him, I mean, he did change the conversation from 2016 onward. Well, 2015 onward. Yeah,
he did. He absolutely did, more in loss than almost any other Democrat. I mean, you don't have to win to change the conversation. Barry Goldwater, who lost in 1964 to Lyndon Johnson, was one of the most influential politicians in history because he started the New Southern Strategy, new iteration. He went straight white supremacist on everything, and everything that came after him, that movement that came after him, the Nixon and the Southern Strategy and everything we see today and the Reagans, all are rooted in Barry Goldwater. So I always ask myself this question. They say, well, Bernie would have won, or what? I think he would have, and I think 15 of the 20 Democratic candidates would have in an anti-Trump vote at a time where he was being blamed for COVID. I don't think Biden gets that moment back again. But here's what I'm saying. What if Bernie lost? What if Bernie went guns blazing and Medicare for all and still lost? I think you would have the movement very similar to Barry Goldwater in 1964 continue to carry on many of those ideas that he went scorched earth on. And that I'm not the believer that if you lose going scorched earth, you could change the future. You would see a lot of things change locally because all those coalitions that he built, they would change locally. That's what we see with Republicans, right? When Republicans lose, they're still changing locally. When Obama became president, all of a sudden the Tea Party grows and they're changing everything locally. When Biden becomes president, all of a sudden all these Republicans are changing locally and having fascist laws. Why doesn't that happen when a Republican's president? Why don't you see Democrats changing things locally? But you don't have that movement going on. So I believe you go guns blazing, whether you win or whether you lose. And even if you lose, you might win in the long run.
True. I just don't have faith in the Democratic Party anymore.
No, neither do I.
Yeah. I'm looking at the people running. I'm just like, really? This is your guy? This is your gal? All right. That's how I feel, and that's
I don't have faith
anymore.
I have no faith. I have no faith in a party that would come to the conclusion, we don't even need to primary Joe Biden. I mean, how do you even come to that conclusion? Like, how corrupt must you be to come to that conclusion?
Well, there's some people who still think that you can just take it over, and I'm like, that project has been tried and that project has failed.
Yes.
So why are we continuing to try that? You know what I mean?
We learned.
I go back to, I'm not sure if you got to catch that episode of Savvy Sabs on her show, where she had DNC fraud lawsuit attorneys on her show, where they actually were in the courtroom where the DNC lawyer actually argued that they do not need or have to or even want to actually go by the will of the people. They're a private organization.
Yeah.
So I want to get this through not only to people who side with the Democrats, but also the Republicans too. Because if the DNC is like this, then surely enough, the RNC is just like this too.
Yeah.
And I live in a state where they went overwhelmingly for Trump, but they also passed a $15 minimum wage. It's like,
remind me what state you live in.
Florida.
Oh yeah.
And so, to be honest with you, when you put the plight of people in their hands when it comes to policy, they're gonna go, like Beyonce said, to the left.
Yeah.
And they do that. But the problem is that, you have these politicians that, I hate to say it, some people may get mad at me for this, but being on the right is actually good for corporations. It just is. So therefore, they're going to go to the right every single time, because that's what the politicians, that's who they acclimate themselves to.
Right. Right.
No,
you're right. Mm-hmm. And honestly, I think there's so many game changers, but I think the two biggest seismic game changers of the last 30 years is one is the Supreme Court decision of Citizens United, of making corporations people, because now it's so much harder to get together and fight them, because these billionaires are so rich and they're buying politicians right and left, and locally they're doing it locally. That's what we spend so much time on national politics. Stuff is really moving locally, right? And they buy local politicians, and so that's happening. And then the one before that, which gets a lot less attention, but it's the 1996 Telecommunications Act, and that allowed media consolidation. And prior to that, you had to have a cap, say, on 40 radio stations you could own. You couldn't order more than that. You couldn't own 1,000 or 2,000, and that lifting the caps under Clinton, by the way. Yes. What happened is now all media is in the hands of 5 corporations, where it used to be spread out. It killed black radio overnight. It killed news. It killed sports media. In many ways, it killed music as well. People don't realize that as well, because music, you'd have these pockets that would come up in these local communities, and the local DJs would bring it to light. And now you have some person in the middle of America hitting a button to play the same top 40. It killed so much, but it's not talked about. And why would it be? Because the corporations that benefited from it are not going to talk about it.
Of course, I think it was also Buckley versus Vallejo. That was also a big part of. That was also a big part of corporations being able to, dominate the political space as well. So
Yeah.
so one of my final questions to you is, I have two questions. One of them is a fun question, and one is more of a serious question. But the fun question I wanted to ask is, what is one food that Chuck Modi cannot live without?
That's a good question. Yeah, one food. I mean, it's probably not good, but I'm a burger guy, and I probably shouldn't have burgers because of my blood pressure. But I can't lay off. I want to go vegan, like philosophically, I feel it's a more moral position to take, but my body is not aligned with my morality just yet. So I'm working on it. I'll let you know when that happens. However, I will say this though. The way they're making some of these foods nowadays, like versus say 10, 15 years ago, like they're able to make these vegan foods now that almost taste like the real thing. So
Wow.
I mean, it's pretty incredible. You're like, wow, this is chicken. Wow, this is beef. So maybe that'll be the way. I'll go. But yeah, I'm pretty plain. I still like a good hamburger. I don't. Yeah, I'm pretty plain in my eating habits. Most definitely.
Yeah, look, I love a good burger. I always get my medium, and lettuce, tomatoes, onions,
Mhm,
a little bit of mayo, and some ketchup,
mhm,
and I'm good for the most part. And a good bun,
yeah.
But also, my final question is: in the future, you have lived a very long and good life. What is the final thought that you want people to have about you when you pass on?
I was just working for the people. I was just working for the people, trying to amplify the people. That's all. I used to say I want to be a voice for the voiceless, but I changed that a few years ago. I want to amplify the unheard. That's what I want to do because no one's voiceless. They have votes. We're just not listening, right? They're not voiceless. We're just not listening.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to amplify their voices. They don't need me to be a translator or anything like that. If you go into the street and you go into the protest, you will meet some of those brilliant, passionate people you could ever imagine. And I can't tell you how much along the way protesters have changed me. They've changed me because I'd be like, I never heard about that. Really? And I'll go home and I'll go in through a Google rabbit hole. I'm like, oh my God, that's right. I remember like 21 days into Biden, I remember he had a 100-day moratorium on deportations. And 21 days in, I saw a group, DocuBlack, they were in the street saying, Biden, stop deporting Haitians under Title 42. I'm like, wait a second. I saw on TV that he had a moratorium on deportations. What's this Title 42? They were in there. This was like, he's not even a month old. And they were in the street. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that. Tell me more. So they start speaking into the mic. I go home and I do research. And I could tell you a lot of my research of what I learned is straight from activists. Because if you talk to a lot of activists, they know the most. They've studied the most of these niche issues that you can't find on TV. And I'll be like, I'll do my own research afterwards. I'm like, oh my God, how did I not know about this? You're right. So, a lot of times the protesters have changed me as much as anything with information that I would not have been privy to. So it's really an honor, to be quite honest with you, to be able to go in the street and cover them. So yeah, he amplified the unheard.
Wow, that is beautiful. I actually really respect that, and I thank you for that one. Yeah. Look, Chuck, I just want to say we're basically at the end. This went
No, JB. I'm throwing the question back at you. What do you want to summarize your life?
I got it. I want people to say that he left the world better than he found it.
I'll take that, of course.
Yeah, that's one of my mottos. I always say at the end of my stream, just leave the world better than you found it. Even if you don't change somebody's life in a drastic way, even in small little ways, if you help change somebody's life, you've improved them overall. It could be a smile when you walk by. by. It could be kind words. It could be reaching out to somebody in a text message saying, hey, I haven't heard from you in a while. I just wanted to let you know that I'm thinking about you and that I miss you. Things like that. One of the things I think that is very important, and we talk about this a lot, is things like mutual aid. And it doesn't have to be monetary. Mutual aid could also be something, like I heard that you were going through this particular subject. I researched this for you. Here's some information on that subject. It could be so many different things. But the thing is that showing people that they matter and that you care and that we're all one at the end of the day. I think that's what matters. And I think that's what I try to do, even in my small little ways. I'm not
Yeah.
at it, but I try to improve every single day.
I like that. And I like that so much. I'm going to come full circle and close, going back to your original question about activism and how do we have perspective. So we're trying to score touchdowns. And when we don't score the touchdown, we get demoralized, we get angry, we get depressed. We didn't score the touchdown. But instead of having that paradigm, how about the activisms of football fields? And we just got to push a few yards down in the other direction and be happy that the next one's going to score the touchdown. That's all we can do.
Man, see, this is why you need to come back on.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's do it. And we'll talk about journalism. Exactly. Some more. Let's do it.
Definitely. And where can they find you, Chuck?
Nowadays I tweet at Chuck Modi1, but I've been a little light lately into the NBA playoffs. A lot of people aren't into sports, but I'm doing that. I write it. That's been haven't written in a while, but I may pick up the sports writing soon. And then I do a sports radio show on WPFW every Thursday morning, 10 a.m., where sports and politics collide. I do a radio show with Dave Zirin and Atan Thomas, and we talk about sports, politics, and justice.
All right. Thank you so much, Chuck, for coming on. It was a pleasure. It was a privilege. I appreciate you coming on. You agreeing to come on my little channel. So thank you so
JB,
much.
anytime. Appreciate it. Keep doing what you're doing. Yes, sir.
Thank you so much.
All right.
All right. Bye-bye.
You got it. Peace.
Okay. All right, everybody. Woo, that was a great conversation, was it not? So, man, there was so many good points that he made, and I appreciate. And the thing is that one of the things I want people to realize is that the people who I bring on, I'm not going to agree with 100%. You're never going to agree 100% with everybody. But the thing is that there's so many overlapping things that we can agree on, and we're really all just pushing for a more equal, equitable, and egalitarian society. And because of that, I have respect for the work that he does. And I love the fact that he actually talked about your body of work speaks for you. And so that's one thing I want to speak for me is my body of work. And I'm trying to do better, especially as how I treat others in this space. It can get tough because then you can be influenced by others, to be a certain way or speak a certain way, and just because you're telling the truth, you can disagree without being disagreeable. You know what I mean? And so I'm trying to do what the late Michael Brooks said, be kind to others, but be ruthless to institutions. I hate capitalism. I hate misogyny and misogynoir. I hate racism. I hate white supremacy. I hate homophobia. I hate transphobia. I hate all these things. But at the same time, I'm going to be kind to the people who have been brainwashed into perpetuating these things so that I can help pull them out of it. You know what I'm saying? So that's what I am trying to do, is trying to help people to pull them out of this type of thinking so that they realize we're all connected. Because look, think about it this way. Every single person you have ever known, loved, and hated are part of the same stuff that you are made of from this one planet. It's like Carl Sagan's poet, I guess it's a poem of the pale blue dot. Every single person you ever loved or hated existed on this one tiny little pale blue dot in the vast sea of space, which means we're all connected in one way, shape, or another. When you hurt, I hurt. When you have joy, I have joy. It is incumbent upon me to make sure that, number one, you have joy. Number two, you do not encroach upon the rights of others. Because true freedom does not encroach upon other people's rights. So yeah, that's one of the things that I wanted to say. Now, I'm going to go to the chat really quick because I know there's a lot of people who's been in the chat. Y'all been active as hell. But I just wanted to talk about that. Now, we have CBC voter in the chat saying, "Glad to see you again, JB." Thank you so much. Good Lord, I've been exhausted. I don't know what it was today, but I was exhausted. But you know what's interesting? Having that conversation with Chuck actually helped me to feel a little bit better. I feel a little bit more energized now. Plus, you guys are amazing, and I appreciate you guys. The Jam Mom's in here saying, "Back at it again." Yes, back at it again. All right. Cobra Commander coming in with some love saying, "JB, good to see you, Cobra Commander." Yipper99 says, "Hand pink waving. Good to see you." Mouse up is in the chat saying, "Sup, friends? Sup, Mouse? Good to see you." Cobra Commander says, "I've been to many demonstrations. The only issue I ever had was never competing politically parties, but folks who still think the cops are there to protect us or something along those lines." I got you. All right. We have Wadi coming in saying, "Hey, everybody. Good to see you." Pachico, who is also a JB member, says, "Yay, JB. Yay, Pachico." All right. Sebastiano coming in with volcanoes. We have Jessica Mai saying, "Hi, glad there's a live on. It will calm my anxiety. Aw, I needed company." Jessica, we are with you, and never forget that you're not alone. Also, remember this, Jessica. You matter even when you don't agree. Think about it. Love you. All right, we have Quantum Alchemist saying, "Hi, feeling like absolute crap. I'm very sorry. Slept 16 hours feeling totally tired, like I'm 90 or so, agitated and angry. Woke up to double standards, loud noise by my neighbors again." Ooh, I'm sorry. You know, I was feeling like crap today too. I felt like I was 65. You feel like you're 90. So I'm sorry. But I'm glad you're here with us. And I'm glad that you are watching and among us. And, whatever you're going through, as far as that feeling goes, I hope it goes away quickly. But even if it doesn't, I'm glad that you're still with us, no matter what. And I hope that tomorrow is a lot better. Because, when you feel better, I'll feel better. Jessica Mai says something interesting. Full moon is June 3rd. Maybe we're riding the wave up. No. And I know a lot of people are like, "Oh, well, that can't be the reason." I don't know. It might be a scientific reason behind it because, there's many different vibrations that we probably haven't tuned into as human beings on this planet. Science is telling us new information day by day. Just look at the James Webb Telescope that is looking out into outer space. They're looking at it through different, infrared waves now and seeing things that they thought were the truth scientifically, but then they're just like gobsmacked now. They're looking at the universe in the beginning of the universe and seeing things that are completely different. So, maybe, just maybe, there are certain different conditions within our solar system that also have a bearing vibrationally on how we develop in the womb and how we are mentally and things like that. I mean, we do know that the waves of the sea and many different, things within our planet are actually governed by the magnetic fields and the gravitational forces of the moon. So you never know. But the thing is, we're always learning scientifically, and science will eventually back certain things up that maybe we have been suspecting for a while now. Or not. Who knows? Reality of Evolution is also in the chat. Is also a JD member saying, afternoon all. Good to see you. All right. Meteor Dreams asked a really interesting question. I wanted to answer this. Meteor Dreams, thank you so much for the super chat. Meteor Dreams asks, guys, why is the left becoming more anti-LGBTQ? This is a deep question. I don't necessarily see the left becoming more anti-LGBTQ. I think there's a couple of things. I think some of the people on the left that are anti-LGBTQ, I think they're brainwashed into thinking those thoughts, number one. Number two, I think the ones that are brainwashed into thinking anti-LGBTQ ideologies are the loudest in the room. They may not be the majority in the room, but they're just really loud. And so there's a lot of people that are being manipulated into looking at other disenfranchised groups and saying, there's some of the reasons for our problems. Black people. It was Black people that were the reason for a lot of our problems. I talked about the Chinese Exclusion Act a couple of weeks ago. That was the onset of the Chinese people are taking all of our jobs. So the Chinese Exclusion Act was enacted. Then, for instance, look what happened during the Second World War, right? Remember what happened, in Pearl Harbor? Then they wanted to blame that on all Japanese people. So they put in Japanese internment camps. All right. Then on top of it, then you also had, Black people again. Then it was Muslims, right? Remember 9/11? Then it became, immigrants from our southern border again. Even if they could have been from Mexico, they could have been from Nicaragua, Guatemala, Venezuela. It didn't matter. They were still classified as Mexican, even though they weren't. People need to pick up a book and read. And then they were blaming them. Now it's trans people. And so there's always going to be that demon. They're always going to be labeled that demon. When in reality, the people that we should be looking at are the people who own our government. That's who we should be looking at. The people who run the big banks, people who run the central banks, people who run the biggest corporations in our world, the people who are owners of Blackstone, BlackRock, Vanguard, those who are we should be looking at. But they'll tell other people who are within our class, oh no, it's these people who are marginalized that are the problem. And so unfortunately, some people on the left are also falling for that. I hate to say it, but some are. And it pains me because I don't want to see that happen. But ultimately, I want to be kind to them and help them gear themselves into open their eyes and go, yeah, no. And then some of them will harp on, well, look at this example and look at that example. And I'm like, number one, do you have the full context for the example? And number two, even if you do have the full context of the example, do you want to paint all these people with a broad brush in this particular way? I'm a Black man. I'm also a gay man. And I'm also a disabled man. And I'm also a man. I do not want to be painted with a broad brush for the sins of some people within my community. And I don't want that to be for other people as well. I do not want one mistake or one bad drag queen to be plastered against all, to be vilified. I don't want all drag queens to be vilified for one bad drag queen's either mistake or transgression. Just like I don't want one black person who did something wrong to be mistaken for it. See what I mean? So that's the thing. And so that's why I don't think the left is becoming more anti-LGBTQ. I just think that there are some who are the loudest in the room, and some of them are being brainwashed by the people at the top. That's what I think. I may get attacked for it, and if I do, I do. But that's honestly what I think. I think you have to come at it from a class analysis, honestly. The Tori Lee coming in saying, JEB, good to see ya. All right. Sakudo says, yo, JB, grilled or raw onions? Both, but not on the same burger. One will have grilled. Oh, and mushrooms. Yes, I love my fungus. Put some grilled onions and mushrooms on a burger with some Swiss cheese. Woo! Maybe I should have that for dinner. Lord, oh Lord. You know I like to eat. Baba Yaga Forest Dweller says, uh-oh, it's Modi. Yeah, Chuck was on. So good to see. All right. All right, so let's go to some more chats. All right. Bill Bradley says the hypothesis phase existed before science was a thing. Thank you so very much. All right. Hen's Teeth says, good to see you, Hen's Teeth. That's why I don't speak very often. I have very limited energy. Yeah, I have to be selective with my energy. There's times where even after dialysis, people will be like, you know, they want to talk. And I'm like, yeah, I don't feel like talking. And the thing is, I used to feel bad about it because I used to feel like, oh man, JB, they want to talk. But the thing is, I learned that sometimes I have to keep my sentences very short to the point while still being respectful. You know what I mean? So that's why. You guys are really chatting in here. Let me see. Bad Cookie says science isn't hard. Science is all ideas that are tested until proven truth, and those truths can change. Very true. Very true. Sorry, guys. I'm going up in the comment. Oh, old man Barker. Where's the where's the hat? No, that was my brother's hat. I just, yeah, it's not for me. I'm not a hat wearer. If anybody, if anybody notices, I don't really wear hats. I'm not a big thing. Who's Daniel Bisogno? He's hospitalized and might die. Please pray for him, please. Who's Daniel Bisogno? I have no idea. Huh. Whoever it is, I hope they pull through. But who knows? Yeah, I know what it's like to be in the hospital, so I don't know. But yeah, so just to let you guys know, so RBN got a copyright. They got a strike on YouTube, so you won't see RBN live today. So that's unfortunate. And so, be sure to. I think RBN will be back doing live streams Friday, maybe. So hopefully, fingers crossed. Yeah, it'll just be once that 7 days is up. So yeah, that sucks because there's certain things that you can't talk about on YouTube, even though it's being backed by scientists, if you know what I mean. So yeah, it's just bad on his face. But if you guys would like to also, I think there's some clips that came out that I think they're allowing through. So go ahead and yes, go ahead and support that. Also, I was supposed to have on Kit Cabela from Heartlands Media. Um, I had something came up on Saturday, so I wasn't able to. But I'm going to be having him on this weekend at 3 p.m. Eastern, so I can't wait to do that. Also, this evening, I will also be. I don't know if I. Yeah, I think yeah, this was mentioned last week, but I'm also doing a course, a Marxism course on Midwestern Marx Institute. So I'll be on their class tonight. Today is the second week, so it's a 10-week course on Marxism. So I'll be doing that so I can learn more about Marx. So I'm excited about that as well. So I can't wait to get into that. I also got to look into. I'm trying to look into who I'm going to be having on next week. I have a calendar for these things, and I'm just like, you know what, JB, you really need a calendar. You need to get more organized. So thankfully, I am actually more organized. So, I will be. You see, so next week is the 6th. Is this week the 6th? The hell already? Good Lord. Yeah. Okay. So the 6th, I'm going to have on Kamal Franklin from Black Power Media. He's going to be here same time, 2 p.m. Eastern. So that's going to be a very good interview. I cannot wait to have a conversation on his evolution and how he came to be the Kamal Franklin that we know. So I cannot wait. That's going to be a very interesting conversation. However, for now, I will make sure to also put up the clips because excuse me, because I didn't last week because it was basically just one subject. But be sure to tune in. Thank you so much to everyone for being in. Oh, by the way, I also got to check on Rockfin because I know. Is there anybody on Rockfin? All right, we got one watcher. Good to see all of you on Rockfin as well. Now, thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. If you guys would like to, you guys can go and subscribe to my Substack so you guys can get email notifications, jaybefaunt.substack.com, so you guys can be notified instead of relying on YouTube because you guys can just go by me. Why not? Also, thank you so much to the patrons on Patreon, Coffee, as well as members. Thank you so much to all of you. Without you guys, I would not be able to do this work because it's been a lot. And I'll be getting back to the reading of Asada Shakur's autobiography as well as Laziness Does Not Exist by Dr. Devon Price. I've been exhausted from that trip. Jet lag and dialysis does not mix. So I got to get into that. But yeah. And so, yeah, everybody, look, like I said to Chuck, what I always say at the end of streams, water your plants, water yourselves. You know what I'm saying? Leave the world better than you found it. And even if it's something small in improving somebody's world, you did leave somebody's world better. It could be a smile. It could be just letting them know that they matter. You could be saving a life. That's very important. Look, smoke them if you got them. Drink them if you got them. If you don't got them, watch something funny. Watch something that's hilarious because joy is revolutionary. All right. I know y'all been waiting for it because I've been looking sexy lately. Mwah. Forehead kisses. Mwah. Forehead kisses. Mwah. Forehead kisses. Yo. You didn't know I'm going to do it 3 times. You know I got you. Because it's all about love, baby. Stay lovely, folks. Stay classy. And take time to get butt naked. Ah! consensually. I know some of y'all nasty.